Hi, I'm Margaret with Whimsy North, and today I'm going to show you how to make this quick and easy double brim knit hat using your Addie King knitting machine. So here are the supplies we're going to need. You're going to need your Addie King size knitting machine, some waste yarn in a color that is different than the hat colors that you are going to do. This is just simply a Caron Simply Soft in a turquoise color worsted weight yarn. And then you're going to need, for this color block version, two different colors. I'm using We Are Knitters, the Petite Wool. I really like the weight that it gives this hat. This will be my base color, and this will be my top color. You'll also need a pair of scissors, the needle that comes with the Addie knitting machine, which is really nice to pick off the stitches, and then this tool that also comes with your Addie, because that's what we're going to use to make the double brim. So let's get started. Check to make sure that you are set for knitting in the round, and then take your waste yarn and pull some out here. And what you're going to do is you're going to cast on using this waste yarn. So I like to pull the tail and bring it down into the center of the knitting machine, making sure that the foot guide is closed and that I'm starting at the first black needle. That's where I'm going to start casting on. So what I'm going to do is take this waste yarn and loop it underneath that, just making sure that's closed. I'm going to loop it underneath that first black needle, slowly turning the knob and going behind the second needle, and then in front of the third, and you're just going to continue to go around going in front and behind every other needle until you get all the way back to the black needle again. Okay, so here I'm coming around to the black needle, and you will know that you cast it on correctly if you get to that first black needle and your yarn is about to go underneath it. So now I'm going to fit it through the guide, and then I'm going to zero back out my counter here. Okay, so now you're ready to knit 5 rows using this waste yarn. So I'm just going to go around for 5 rounds. Now, holding onto the yarn slightly, but not too tight. You don't want to pull too tight on the yarn because that could make the hat smaller. It can make the stitches gap a little bit more. So you just want to lightly hold it so you can guide it through, watching as it goes around to make sure you don't drop any stitches. Now, once I get close to the last part of my 5th round, you will see it actually says 4. And the tail is right here, so I know I'm towards the end. I'm going to slowly make it to the black needle, and then I'm going to cut my waste yarn, put that aside, open up my guide, take my waste yarn and put it into the center. I like to keep it still around, or underneath, I should say, that black first needle. Now I'm going to take the base color of my hat make sure I have some yarn. And I'm going to show you, this is the base color, so it's going to go on the bottom part of my hat. And I'm going to show you how to put this next color on to the machine. So I grab a tail just like I did with the waist yarn and I stick it in the center. Then I loop it into or underneath that black needle again and into the guide and close the guide. Then I like to hold on to both the waist yarn and the new yarn while I slowly turn the crank and make sure that both of them go down underneath that first black needle. Then I'm going to zero out the counter again so that I can start back at the beginning with this base color. My yarn is in my guide, I'm at 0, and I'm ready to start knitting. I'm going to knit a total of 40 rounds using this base color, making sure that I watch that no stitches are dropping. So now I've reached my 40th round. I just got back to the beginning of the round. My waist yarn is at the bottom, and I'm going to show you how to make the double brim. Right next to the tail of the waist yarn and the hat yarn, you're going to see these little loops in between the waist yarn. You want to look for the loops that are the furthest away, so the top ones, the first one to the left of that tail right there, and you're going to put your hook through that, bring it up, and hook it underneath the first black needle. So then you slowly turn the needle and go for that next top loop there. You want to make sure, as you can see across, these are all the loops of the first round of the brim color. So you grab that second one, place it up on the needle and slowly turn. Oh, you can see how, because I wasn't putting any tension on my yarn, it's almost about to slip off here. So I just want to make sure that I put a little tension on my yarn as I turn the handle so that I don't lose a stitch. I'm going to grab that third loop, pull it up and underneath that needle, and then put a little tension on my yarn as I begin to turn. You just want to watch the stitches to the right to make sure that you're not losing any. As you can see, that one just dropped off, so I'm going to slowly turn back a little bit and just make sure that that working yarn is underneath the red peg and underneath the black needle, so that when the black needle goes down, it catches that yarn. Otherwise, I would have a dropped stitch later on. Okay, so putting a little tension on my yarn, making sure that it's going underneath that stitch. I'll go to the next one, grab that loop, place it up and underneath the needle. So you're going to continue to do this all the way around. I like to go slow just to make sure that I'm able to grab the loop and put a little tension on my yarn, and so that I don't drop any stitches. But once you do it a couple times, it gets pretty easy. Once you get towards the end of this round, things will get a little bit tighter, so you'll just have to make sure that you get that stitch and gently pull it up onto the needle. Once you get that last stitch onto the very last white needle, you can put your tails on the inside, and now you have your finished brim. To continue on the pattern, you're going to knit 5 more rounds of this base color. I've reached the end of my 5th round with the base color, and now I'm going to put the second color on. So I'm going to cut the yarn from the base color, and just like I did with the waist yarn, I will open up the guide, take my yarn out, keeping it underneath that black needle, and place it on the inside. Then I'm going to grab my second color, the top color, grab the tail, place that inside. I like to kind of just touch it to the ground to measure how far it needs to be. Then, looping it underneath that same black needle again and through the guide. Holding on to both strands of the yarn. Again, I'm going to slowly turn to make sure both of them go underneath that black needle. And there we're going to start the next rounds. Now you're going to continue knitting with this second color until your row counter hits a total of 70 rounds. Now I haven't hit my 70 rounds yet, but I want to show you how I like to take and remove this waist yarn here. I like to do it while it's still on the machine because it gives a really nice tight hold and I can easily see the loops. So all I need to do is, as you can see, the waist yarn is connected to the brim color yarn at the bottom here. I just stick my scissors in every couple stitches, making sure that I'm only cutting the waist yarn so I get right underneath that whole section of waist yarn, and I just snip it all up. Then I can pull out the pieces, and I just do that all the way around, starting to the right of the tail. Again, making sure I don't cut any of the main brim yarn. This is why it's really important to have a waist yarn color that is a lot different from your brim, so you can easily see the difference between both stitches. Now you can see this nice, cozy, double thick brim that is super easy to make, and you don't even have to sew it at the end. It gives a really great finished look and easy to do on your Addy. So I'm going to continue knitting the rest of my rounds until I reach that total of 70 rounds on my counter. I've just finished my 70 round and I've made it back to the first black needle. Now I'm going to cast off all the stitches. To do that, I like to make sure I have a long enough tail. So sometimes I like to wrap it around my Addy twice just to make sure I have a long enough tail for sewing through all the stitches. Then I place the yarn on the needle, the darning needle that you get from the Addy King knitting machine. It's really great because it has this slanted tip which helps really get underneath the stitches as you're casting them off. To cast off the stitches, take the yarn out of the guide and slowly turn the handle so that the needle goes down and you can see that live stitch sticking up. Insert your needle underneath that stitch and pull it through. Oh, I got a knot here. You don't want that because you want to be able to cinch the hat. So just make sure that it's through the loop and then you can pull that loop off the machine. Slowly turn the handle so that the next stitch comes off. Put your needle through that stitch and pull it through. I like to do a couple of the first stitches pulling my yarn all the way through, and then you can start to pick a couple off onto the needle at one time. See how I hold the needle in my left hand, then I can grab a couple of the stitches off and turn the handle with my right hand and then pull them through. I may have made a little too long of a tail for this one as it's getting in my way a little bit. Continue to pick the stitches off of each peg in this way until you make your way all the way around. I've made my way around, picking up stitches and pulling the yarn through as I go. Once you get the hang of it, it can go pretty quick. Just make sure that you go slow enough so that you don't drop any stitches. Okay, dropped those. All right, so on the last stitch, you're going to pull the yarn all the way through. You can set your knitting machine aside and I'll show you how to finish your hat. The first thing you want to do is stretch it out a little bit. So when it's on the machine, it's stretched really far horizontally, so side to side. So what you want to do is really stretch out those stitches vertically to after you've got it to the shape you want, you're going to pull the tail on the top to close the top of the hat. Then you'll take your darning needle and thread that through the hat a few times to close the top. Now tuck that tail on the inside of your hat, and you'll go ahead and weave in all the ends from your different colors and from the top. Once your ends are woven in, you can give it a little steam block and add a pom-pom if you like. I personally like to add a faux fur pom-pom to my hats. You can use a darning needle to thread your pom-pom onto your hat, but sometimes I just like to poke it through. As you can see, I have not woven in my ends yet. Attach the bottom, and there you have it.